Hey everyone, Stephanie here, welcoming you to the 12th episode of the Get Literate podcast. Today we are going to talk about one of my favorite things. Did you know this about me? Did you know that I am a voracious list maker? I love lists in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Short lists, long lists, colorful lists, lists that are typed, lists that are printed, digital lists, to-do list, bucket list, gratitude lists, creative lists, just because list. I love all the lists. And yes, I am that person who, if I do something that was not originally on my list, I do put it on there just so that I can get the satisfaction of crossing it off. Don't judge. I bet there's lots of you out there who are just like me. So when I see that there are lists inside the books that I'm reading, I get excited because I know that there are fellow list makers out there like me. And I'm often inspired to add to my list making activities, right? Instead of just to-do lists, I get inspired to try new lists in my notebook or new lists that can make my life better or more organized or happier, healthier, more productive. I haven't met a list that I haven't liked yet. And so today, if you are like me and you are a voracious list maker, we're talking sticky notes or maybe even colorful digital sticky notes in Google Keep, like me. Yes, I have one for every day of the week. You are in luck for today's episode because today I am sharing 3 books where the characters are keeping lists and not just your typical to-do lists, but literally life-changing lists that change the characters' lives throughout the course of the story. And if we borrow those lists and make them our own, they might actually do the same for us too. So here we go, 3 books full of list making to inspire your own. First up is a wonderful book. Oh, this book gives me all the feels. It's called 30 Things I Love About Myself. And it is a book written by Radhika Sankani. And I hope I am pronouncing that correctly. But 30 Things I Love About Myself is a book that just gave me all the feels. I laughed louder, I cried some more, I sympathized, I got angry, and I especially blushed, like a lot. I really blushed. So this book is all about Nina. And Nina seemingly has hit rock bottom. She's recently broken up with her fiance. She has a brother who is clinically depressed that she is trying to help. She has a very traditional Indian mom who she is trying to make herself proud in her eyes, and her career is stumbling. But rock bottom really comes when she ends up spending her 30th birthday in jail. Now, she ends up having a very long night in jail. She's crying, she's upset, she's depressed. And one of the officers ends up bringing her a book to help her pass the time and feel a little bit better. And that book isn't just any book. The book is, and you'll have to excuse my language, How to Fix Your Shitty Life by Loving Yourself. She's got nothing left to lose, so she thought, why not? Why not read the book and do the things and see what happens? And so in this book, Nina decides to go on a journey of self-love for the next year and come up with 30 things she loves about herself before her next birthday. Now, some of those initial things she loves come quick and easy, and the others, not so much. They are hard earned, and she pushes herself into new experiences, new ideas, and new perspectives so that she can keep learning about herself and hopefully find 30 things specifically that she does love. Now, this book is light and laughable. Laugh out loud funny in many places. But it was also pretty deep in terms of the learning experiences that Nina was putting herself in. It's one of those books that makes you change the way you see the character, makes you change the way you see yourself and the people who surround you, and maybe the possibilities that are out there that you didn't quite consider before because you never pushed the envelope a bit. So by the end of the book, I won't give it away if she has come up with 30 things Nina loves about herself. But I will say it did inspire me to start a new kind of lists. 30 things I love about myself. And if I'm honest, it wasn't 30. I was going by the whole pick as many items as you're going to be for your birthday. So at the time, there were 43 items on my list. Some of these were little tiny things, and some of these were bigger things, and some of these were lessons I had to learn, but I did keep coming back to this list in my notebook, and it does change things. It does make you feel better about yourself, kinder towards yourself, give yourself more grace, celebrate what you actually are and not just what you hope to become. So this book and Nina, she's been sitting on my shoulder for a while now, and she's been in my notebook for a while now. And I know I'm going to keep thinking of this book long after, and likely probably still blushing too, because some of the content in the book. So that's 30 things I love about myself. Now, the next book I want to share is a fairly new release that is called The List That Changed My Life by Olivia Bairn. Now, this is a different kind of list, right? We just talked about a list of 30 things I love about myself. This book is more of a bucket list, but it's a different kind of bucket list that immediately had me hooked. So this book is all about Georgia. Georgia is a single woman who is doing her best to pay her rent and stay afloat until her sister is diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Her sister is her whole world. And so when she starts to get sick, her whole world starts to change. Now, desperate to help her sister in any way that she can, she agrees to her sister's bucket list she has created for her. Now, her sister had her own bucket list, but now with her diagnosis, that bucket list needs to change. And to help her cope with those changes, she's hoping that Georgie will help her finish the bucket list she wanted with a few changes. Her sister did change the bucket list to be what she thought Georgie needed, as well as what she wanted in her own life. What comes next throughout the book are months of experiences. Things like online dating, going skydiving, running a 10K, making the perfect sponge. Those are all the things that are on Georgia's bucket list that has been created for her. She doesn't always understand them. She doesn't always like them, but she does them for her sister. And in the process, Georgia starts to find a new version of herself that she didn't know was there. And that new version of herself might be just what her sister needs to help her heal and find a new version of herself and her new diagnosis moving forward. It's a book that touches your heart. It's a book that I know that I will hold close to my heart for a while. And it's a book that gets you thinking, what's on your bucket list? And what happens if something today or tomorrow changes your circumstances that allow you to reach those items and reach those aspirations? What would happen to your bucket list? How would it change? Who would help you? What are we waiting for? Especially is a question that I found myself asking because we really don't know what's going to happen. And why do we keep making bucket lists for the rest of our lives when we could, like in this book, make a bucket list for the next year that could have the potential to change the way we see ourselves and the entire world? That's a big takeaway for me. Not just a bucket list until the end of my life, but a bucket list until the end of the year, because why wait? See what happens. So that's the list that changed my life. And reading this book might potentially change yours if you apply the lessons learned and you start getting started on your own before next year bucket list. Now, the third book I want to share is very, very different. It is a young adult book, which sets it apart. But the kind of list inside this book is much different. It's an incredibly powerful novel. Cue the tears, get the tissues, you're going to need them. This book takes us into the mind of Troy Hayes. Hayes is a 16-year-old boy who is struggling with Tourette syndrome and obsessive compulsive disorder. His life is driven by the number 10. 10 steps, 10 ticks, and the biggest, 10 things to do before the 10th anniversary of his diagnosis. So Troy has a list of 10 things, right? And those 10 things are things that he feels he needs to do before he reaches the 10th year of his diagnosis, because that final 10th item on his list is his own suicide. It's heartbreaking. It's much different than the first two books I just shared about the power of a list. So as Troy makes this list of 10 and starts at the top and attempts to check everything off, so he's ready for the big final event, he realizes as he gets closer and closer and he starts to make progress on his list, that those things on his list might actually be the very things that could potentially save his life too. Because those things on the list get him to connect with others, to try new things, and probably most importantly, to talk to someone, to say the word Tourette out loud, to talk to the mother that left him so long ago. This book is powerful. It's raw. It is tear-jerking. It's emotionally crippling at times, especially reading it as a parent, trying to understand what this 16-year-old boy might be going through and how the actions of a parent, however helpful, may help or hurt. This book really embodies why all of us should read children's literature, why all adults, and I believe especially parents, should read middle grade and young adult books because of the perspective it provides and the lessons it can teach us. Now, this list is one that I know I will never make. I will never have a list of 10 with something that ends with the ending of my life. But I can appreciate this kind of list. I can appreciate that it helps give us purpose. I can appreciate that it helps give us something to move forward on. And thankfully, right, you don't know the ending, but thankfully, Troy starts to realize that perhaps this list won't just end his life, but maybe save it. And that's what lists can do too. Right? When we are stressed, lists can be what help us get whatever's on our mind off of our mind and heart and onto the page. And so this was a very different kind of list, but one I think that is very powerful to read about and then makes us appreciate those other kinds of lists much more, like the bucket lists, the one-year bucket lists, and especially the list of things that we love about ourselves. Now, I told you I was going to share 3 books, but I cannot help but sneak in a 4th today. I have to mention this one because I literally finished reading it this morning, right before we were recording, and realized it has lists in it. And this was a book that I could have shared in this episode. So I'm only going to briefly mention it here because I know I'm going to bring it up on another episode in the future. But this is another young adult book. This is a book that's going to come out on September 13th. So maybe this will get you excited to support this author's newest debut. But this book is called E12 Explains It All by Andrea Beatriz Arango. Now, this book is about a seventh grader who is dealing with a lot. And I won't go into deep detail other than to tell you there are a lot of family issues and a lot of school issues and too much for one little girl to handle. Now, in this book, there are multiple kinds of lists. There are lists of things to do. There are lists of things not to do. And there are even some lists of affirmations or things that this character knows for sure to help her make it through. Now, the other thing I didn't mention about this book that I love is that it is written in verse. It is lyrical. It is beautiful, although hard to read in some places. But the verse nature combined with the list making nature of the character in her notebook is a combination that is really tough to beat. So that's all I'll mention for now because I'll take a deep dive in a future episode, but that is Eva-Lise Explains It All. All right, so we are at the end and you know what that means. How can we bring this bookish theme to life in our own lives? Well, I'm hoping that this one is a bit obvious. I want you to get out your notebook and make a list. I want you to get out your sticky notes and make a list. Or I want you to get out your digital device and open up your Notes app or Google Keep and make a list there. Now, what kind of list? Well, that's up to you. Maybe you could take your cue from the books that I've shared with you today. You could challenge yourself to go on a little self-love journey and list 30 things you love about yourself, or however many things you love about yourself you want to document. You could create a bucket list for yourself, maybe the big bucket list of a lifetime accomplishment, maybe a bucket list for the next year. Or maybe you do what I also did, which is create a bucket list for those around me that I think they should do to give them a great experience, just like Georgie's sister did for her. Or maybe you go somewhere else with your list making. Maybe you create a good old-fashioned to-do list. Maybe you create a list of projects you want to accomplish, a list of ideas you have that you want to ponder for the future. The kind of list is completely up to you, but simply making a list and seeing how it helps in some way, whether it alleviates stress, it gets things off of your mind, it helps you think more positively, it helps you think more proactively. Lists can do this for us. And so your challenge this week is to simply decide on one list that you might want to have. And of course, I would love for you to read the book from today's episode that inspired it so that you can go even deeper in your list making. So that's it for me today. 3 plus a bonus book, a challenge to create a list to help you in some way in your own life. And now it's your turn. I want to know all the books that have lists in them, so send them my way. You can comment on the show notes at alitlife.com, or you can find me on your favorite social media platform using Affinito Lit. Send me all the books with lists so that I can, well, pun intended, make a list of them to keep building my TBR too. So that's it for today's episode. Thanks for listening. And as always, happy reading and happy list making.
Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie. I'm a book-loving, notebook-hoarding literacy teacher educator on a mission to change lives one book and one notebook at a time. And this is the Get Literate podcast, a podcast where we explore the power of reading and writing to cultivate a life we love. Each week, I offer a bit of bibliotherapy and share 3 books you need to know about on a bookish theme to fuel our reading hearts and help us grow through what we go through. But that's not all. I also invite you to extend those bookish themes into your own life through notebooking, lifelong learning, and creativity to experience the life-changing magic of reading in our lives. And the best part? Each episode is only 20 minutes or less, so you can spend less time listening and more time reading. Now, on to today's episode.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Get Literate podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at www.alitlife.com. You'll also find additional inspiration for your reading and writing life there, like book lists, notebooking ideas, personalized book recommendations, and an invitation to join my Get Literate members community. Each month, we take a deep dive into one bookish theme and work to bring it to life in our own lives. You'll get a monthly bibliotherapy book calendar with a book recommendation for every day of the month, bonus episodes, live book club sessions, and much more. Learn more at www.getliterate.co.